December 7, 1941, a date that changed the world forever. When Japanese planes struck Pearl Harbor, the United States was suddenly thrust into a global war unlike anything humanity had ever faced. But here's the question. How did a nation with one of the smallest armies on Earth transform into the world's greatest military power in less than 4 years? This is the story of that transformation. A story of courage, unity, and the unstoppable will of a nation that refused to stand aside. This is WW2 Memory, the miracle of mobilization. In 1939, the United States Army was smaller than that of Portugal. Only 174,000 active soldiers served in its ranks, barely enough to defend the homeland. The Great Depression had drained resources, and most Americans wanted no part of another European war. Factories built cars, not tanks. Airfields were nearly empty. Congress believed isolation was safety. But across the Atlantic and the Pacific, the world was burning. Nazi Germany swept through Europe. Japan expanded its empire, and Washington could no longer ignore the storm that was coming. Then, in September 1940, more than a year before Pearl Harbor, President Franklin D. Roosevelt took a bold step. He signed the Selective Service Act, America's first peacetime draft. Every young man between the ages of 21 and 36 was required to register. At the time, many thought it unnecessary, even dangerous. But FDR saw what others could not. If war came, America needed to be ready. When the bombs fell on Pearl Harbor, the sleeping giant awoke. Factories lit up. Recruiting offices filled overnight. Within weeks, an entire nation was preparing for war. By 1945, more than 16 million Americans had served in uniform. Over 11 million in the Army, 4 million in the Navy, and nearly 500,000 in the Marines. It was the fastest and largest military expansion in human history. Training camps appeared almost overnight in the deserts of California, the plains of Texas, the forests of Georgia. Men who had never left their hometowns suddenly found themselves drilling in the mud, marching under blazing suns, preparing to fight in faraway lands they had never even heard of. Entire industries turned upside down. Ford Motor Company stopped producing cars and began assembling B-24 bombers. Shipyards in California launched new Liberty ships every few days, and women poured into factories in record numbers. Rosie the Riveter became a national icon. Behind every poster was a real woman, welding steel, riveting metal, and keeping the arsenal of democracy alive. By 1943, the United States was producing one airplane every 5 minutes and one ship every 17 hours. General George Marshall later said the truly American genius was not in fighting, but in building. Private James R. Watkins, a 22-year-old from Kansas, wrote home in 1943, "We've gone from farmers and shopkeepers to soldiers in 3 months. None of us thought we'd ever see war this close, but now we feel like part of something much bigger." His words echoed across a generation. Ordinary men, mechanics, teachers, miners, students, now wore uniforms. They trained together. They fought together. They learned the meaning of sacrifice. And while they fought overseas, America's home front never slept. Ration books, victory gardens, war bonds, every citizen played a part. For the first time in history, an entire society became part of the war machine. Over 400,000 Americans would never return home, but their legacy became the foundation of a new world order, one built on freedom, democracy, and resilience. The American Army, once tiny and under-equipped, became a global powerhouse. It landed on beaches in North Africa, fought through the mountains of Italy, and pushed across the fields of France toward Berlin. The Navy ruled the oceans, From the Atlantic convoys that kept Britain alive to the Pacific battles that turned the tide at Midway, Guadalcanal, and Leyte Gulf. By 1945, American shipyards had built more tonnage than all Axis navies combined. The Air Forces, still part of the Army, filled the skies with thousands of aircraft. B-17 Flying Fortresses and B-29 Super Fortresses carried the war deep into enemy territory. From Europe to Japan, they delivered a storm of steel and fire that helped end the conflict. And the Marines, fierce, determined, unbreakable, became legends at Iwo Jima, Saipan, and Okinawa. Their courage and sacrifice would forever define the American fighting spirit. Each branch wrote its own chapter in the epic story of victory. Together, they forged the mightiest military machine in history. By the end of World War II, the United States was no longer the hesitant power it had been in 1939. It had become the arsenal of democracy, a symbol of freedom and strength. In just 4 years, America built more planes, ships, and weapons than any other nation in human history. It trained millions of soldiers, supplied its allies, and liberated continents. But beyond the numbers, there was something deeper, a spirit, a belief that ordinary people could achieve the extraordinary when united by a common purpose. When the soldiers came home, they didn't just return from war, they returned to rebuild their country. They brought with them a sense of pride, resilience, and unity that would shape the next generation. The GI Bill gave millions a chance to study, buy homes, and start families. Suburbs grew, the baby boom began, and America emerged as the leader of the free world. What began with 174,000 men ended with 16 million heroes. From fear to faith, from isolation to unity, from a modest army to a global force for democracy. By 1945, the transformation was complete. America had proven that its true power lay not just in its weapons, but in its people, in their ability to adapt, to work, and to sacrifice together. The world had changed forever, and so had the United States. It was now a nation capable of defending freedom anywhere on earth. As one veteran later said, "We didn't think of ourselves as heroes. We just did what had to be done." Those words capture the essence of an entire generation, the generation that turned the tide of history. From a small peacetime army to the world's mightiest force, this is the story of how America built victory, one soldier, one ship, and one dream at a time. Because every number hides a face, and every face tells a story. This was WW2 Memory. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more untold stories of courage, sacrifice, and the people who shaped history.